All right, welcome back. So we're going to talk about three main types of business organizations. That is sole proprietorships, partnerships, and corporations. So with a sole proprietorship, sole meaning one, this is one person that assumes sole responsibility for the success and failure of the business. Now you can see down here on my screen, I have pros and cons, pluses and minuses. All of these have pros and cons. So the biggest benefit of a sole proprietorship is it's easy. It's easy to start. It's easy to end. And this is part of why they're very common. Another great thing is you get to make the decisions. You get to keep all the profits. It's very simple in that regard. And there's some nice tax benefits actually to being a sole proprietor. So when we first moved to Texas, I did kind of my own thing for a while. I was a kind of freelance. And so I was a sole proprietor. And in terms of the easiness to start and end when I decided to do other things, is that really the paperwork involved was very minor. And the tax benefits were great because there's a lot of little things you can legally write off when you are a sole proprietor. At the time, it was legal to write off. I actually could write off part of my mortgage. I took the square footage of my office and I could take that out. You can, when you buy things, when you buy supplies, or perhaps when if you need to use a car for your business. And of course, you want to make sure that all of that's legal, but there are benefits to that. The downsides, limited life. So the thing is, you are the business. When I would file my taxes during that time, the tax ID for my business was my social security number. So the business and myself were one and the same, which meant that if anything happened to me, well, the business is gone. Also, this one right here is a big one, unlimited liability, right? My social security number is on the paperwork. So if the business owed money, I personally owned money. So these are small businesses where there's not a lot of money on the line because of the liability thing. For me, I wasn't borrowing any money. It wasn't that big of a deal. But if you start simple and you have a sole proprietorship and you start to actually, borrow a lot of money, then you want to take a look at maybe changing your business organization so that you have some protection. Another downside, it can be difficult to raise funds. You're small potatoes. The bank might look at you and go, I don't really see a lot of potential there, or it's just too risky to give you money. Now, about 70% of businesses are sole proprietorships. They are really easy and therefore they are very popular. So a lot of times, we have a guy that does our lawn. He's probably a sole proprietor. And there are a lot of people out there that are kind of doing things on the side. He has another career actually. And a lot of times that's a sole proprietorship. So they are very common because they are so simple. Now, let's say you wanted to get together with two or more people and create a partnership. So partnerships, it's not just two people, it might be you and a few people. The opportunities there, the good things, is that you can specialize. Maybe there is a partner that you want to connect with who is way better at doing things that you're not so great at. Maybe you're very creative, maybe you're very energetic, but you're just not that great at doing the numbers and sitting down and doing the kind of behind the scenes type of work. Well, you could partner with somebody who can do that for you. You might have access to more funds, right? Because now there's more than one of you going out and looking for money, and you share responsibilities, and that's kind of nice. However, you also share decision making, and that's kind of bad. So the decision making piece is really where partnerships can run into trouble. One, you have to be on the same page about where you're going financially with the business. You have to trust them financially because you do have this unlimited liability piece. If you don't organize your partnership in such a way that you've limited your liability, well, you're on the hook. And if one of your partners messes up financially, that could also reflect on you. And you might find yourself liable for some of the things that your partner has done. They also have limited life, right? Because they're tied to the life of the partners. So if something happens to the partners, then something happens to the business. And for these reasons, they're most likely to fail of the three kinds of business organizations because you have to keep getting along with those partners. Where you tend to see partners most often is like if you go to the doctor or the dentist, a lot of times they have somebody that practices with them. That's really common. However, if you're in a situation like that, where there's a lot of money tied up in the business, usually they have done something to limit their liability. The type of partnership we're talking about right here is not a limited liability. We're just talking about general partnerships. General partnerships face this issue of unlimited liability, where the partners are responsible for the company's debts. Finally, we have corporations. Corporations are completely different. A corporation is its own person. It's literally, in the eyes of the law, its own person. It is a legal entity separate from the individual that started the business. So, you might have started the corporation, but now you're no longer like the owner. Now the corporation is its own thing. So corporations are owned by stockholders or shareholders. Same thing. We put this as a positive, as a plus, because that's actually a big reason for this next one, and that is limited liability. So stockholders or shareholders are not liable for a firm's debts at all. The only thing you can lose is the money you put into this. And I'll show you an example of a share of stock in a minute for a company that's not doing so well right now. So what happens is the owners become the shareholders, right? As I said in the beginning of the presentation, when we did the vocabulary, when you buy a share of stock, you own a little piece of that corporation now. You are part owner. So all the shareholders are the people who own the corporation. So the person who started it might still be involved. They might be part of the leadership. They might even be the CEO. But the leadership is not necessarily the ownership. Those are the people who are hired to run the business. Now, here's another big one, unlimited life. So corporations just kind of live on because they're their own person. I mean, I think I mentioned Disney stock at the beginning of this presentation. Okay, Walt Disney passed away a long, long time ago, but Disney Corporation lives on. So it just goes on and on. It's also much easier to raise funds because you can sell stocks, you can issue bonds, right, and borrow money through the marketplace like that. Now, downsides. It's really difficult to start. So, whereas something like a sole proprietorship was super easy, well, a corporation, that's really difficult. You will need to get a lawyer. You're going to need to have legal expense, time, effort. These are far more complicated organizations. Profits can be taxed twice. So in other words, the corporation can be taxed on its income, right? Because it's a person too, so it has to pay corporate income tax. And then also, if the corporation's shares earn money, right? If it goes up in value on the stock market, well, you can be taxed on that profit as well. Also, corporations face much greater government regulations, much greater government restrictions. They have to go through quite a bit more hoops, and they are beholden to a lot more oversight than a smaller company. Now, only about a fifth of businesses are corporations, but they get about 90% of the profit because corporations tend to be larger. So let's go back to this big piece here on limited liability. So again, limited liability means I am not liable for the corporation's debts personally. So here's an example I'm going to give you. We're going to switch over before we get into mergers. We're going to take a look at this company right here, which you might be aware of. It's a cosmetic company called Revlon. Well, Revlon hasn't been doing well the last few years. And in December, so just very recently, they filed for bankruptcy, or they agreed to file for bankruptcy. And now Revlon owed, let's scroll down here, close to $3 billion. Revlon owed close to $3 billion. So if you owned shares of Revlon, my thing is whatever. If you own shares of Revlon, no one's coming after you for the $3 billion. You are not liable for Revlon's debt, even though you own shares of Revlon, right? Even though you're an owner, the most you can lose is the money you invested in Revlon. That's your only liability, is like, dang, I invested in this, it didn't go very well, so now I've lost that money. But Revlon's actual big, giant, multi-billion dollar debt, no one's coming after you. You're not going to lose your house. You are not personally liable. So if we look, and we're going to switch on over here, if we look at how you would have done financially had you invested in Revlon, say, a year ago, well, you would have lost money. Today, it's trading for about 44, 45 cents a share. If you look, I'm on the Yahoo Finance website, which we'll explore later in the semester. If we look a year ago, I'm clicking here on the 1 year ago kind of historic screen here. It's moving very slow because I am doing this through Nearpod. But if we go to a year ago, let's try that one more time. It was trading at about, here we go, January 10th. That's the day I'm recording this. It was trading for $10.34 a share. All right, so if you had bought a bunch of shares for over $10 each, and now they're only worth 44 cents each, well, you just lost almost $10 a share. Let's say you had 100 shares. Okay, so you could have lost that money, but that's it. That's all your liability. You're not liable for anything else. So before we get into mergers, let's look at those three basic types of business organizations we talked about, which are sole proprietors, partnerships, and corporations. So let's pause and do a little practice, and then we'll get into mergers.